Here are our top 36 wide receivers for Week 15. To start it off, obviously, it's Justin Jefferson. He is far and away the best receiver. He's got the most yards this year, and no matter what the matchup, you're starting him. So, yeah, start Justin Jefferson.
Number 2 is going to be Stefon Diggs. You could have went with a lot of places here, but I like the matchup against Miami, who just got torched by the Chargers. Both receivers put up over 20 points in PPR, so I think Stefon Diggs provides pretty high upside this week.
Also in S tier is Davante Adams. Adams has at least 11 targets in 5 of his last 6 games, and although that 1 week was last week, again, a weekly starter, you line him up no matter what.
Next is going to be Jamar Chase against Tampa Bay. With Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins a little banged up, he should see the bulk of the targets this week, and he's just an elite receiver, so you're starting him no matter what, and I love his upside this week.
All right, and rounding off the S tier is Tyreek Hill against Buffalo. Not maybe the most ideal matchup, and Tua has been struggling a little bit, but Tyreek Hill still gets his. He's just going to get the ball regardless, and just such a weapon that can make things happen after he gets the ball that you're going to start him no matter what.
All right, so starting off, our A tier is going to be A.J. Brown against Chicago. It's an excellent matchup. The Eagles have been killing it all year. He's Jalen Hurts' right-hand man, so you start him with confidence this week.
All right, next up, Ceedee Lamb, also in the A tier. I actually had a down game last week against Houston. Houston's been surprisingly decent against the pass. This week against Jacksonville should be a better matchup. Could end up being like a shootout type matchup. So, yeah, I want to start Ceedee Lamb everywhere.
Yeah, next up is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He does have a bad matchup this week against the Jets, who are very good against receivers, which is why he is lower than where we typically would have him. And the Lions are on the road, and they have struggled. Their points per game on the road versus at home is very different. So you're still going to start them, but maybe just temper expectations a little bit this week due to matchup.
All right, we got Keenan Allen against Tennessee, a good matchup for wide receivers and the passing offense in general. Since he's returned from injury, he's been solid, 10-plus points in all of his 4 games since returning. And in the last 2 weeks, he's got 14 targets in each of those 2 matchups. Tennessee can stop the run, but they can't stop the pass, so I love Keenan Allen this week.
Next up is going to be Garrett Wilson. They do get to play Detroit this week, which is an excellent matchup. They've been bleeding fantasy points to receivers. Do make sure Mike White is going to play. I know he did get banged up, but it's trending that he will play, so just keep an eye on that. If Zach Wilson ends up being the starter, this will bump down Garrett Wilson, in my opinion. But as long as Mike White's the starter, he should be a top 12 receiver.
All right, and then very similar to what I said about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams is a solid start. That offense has just looked so much better since these 2 receivers are in the lineup. It just changes so much. And again against Tennessee, great matchup for wide receivers and a lot of boom potential. So I love fitting in Mike Williams to any lineup.
All right. Kicking off our B tier is going to be DK Metcalf. Typically, he would be a little higher. He's actually been very solid this year. He has a good floor. I do like how Geno has been spreading the ball around, and he's passing for good yards. And they haven't been able to run the ball as effectively as you would have thought, but they do play San Fran, and it's on a short week on a Thursday. So those 2 do work against him in this case, but I still think you're going to have a hard time not putting him in your lineup.
All right, and then also in B tier, we've got DeAndre Hopkins. Again, a player who has been solid since, he's played this year, literally hasn't had a down week. So much volume going to DeAndre Hopkins, and even last week against New England, the 99% of that game was with a backup quarterback, Colt McCoy, and still had a decent game. This week, they are going up against Denver, which is a really good defense, and it probably could be a low-scoring game. However, I don't think you can really bench DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep. Next up is going to be Tyler Lockett. I believe he has a touchdown in 6 straight games, which is just a crazy stat, especially for someone like Tyler Lockett. So you're going to start him most likely. San Fran isn't the best matchup, but like I said, you can't really get him out of your lineup unless you just have elite receivers. So start him, maybe just temper your expectations a little bit.
All right. Chris Godwin, a guy who gets a ton of volume. So in any PPR type format, in my opinion, he's a great flex start. A guy who gets a lot of screen passes and short looks, who's a lot more consistent because of that than Mike Evans is in that offense. So just a model of consistency. And although last week was a little bit of a down week against San Fran, still got 9 targets, and San Fran is a much tougher defense than his matchup this week against Cincinnati.
Rounding out our B tier is going to be Amari Cooper. He is at home this week, which means you play him. He's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game at home and only, I believe, like 8 or 9 on the road. It's a crazy phenomenon. That's just how it works. I know 2 weeks ago when Deshaun Watson made his first start, he looked awful. His off-target percentage was extremely high. But actually this past week, he did correct that. He's knocking the rust off. I believe he was top 3 this past week in on-target percentage, which is a stark difference from 2 weeks ago. So I think they're coming around on him. He is going to be the most targeted receiver in the offense, so I'm starting him this week.
Yep, I think he has a lot of boom potential. All right, moving on to C. So that we're going to have a lot more, red flags. Potentially, these are players that could be in or out of your lineup this week. Just depends on what you have on the roster. Jaylen Waddle definitely has those red flags and could have a bad game, but also a player with a lot of speed, a lot of versatility that can get a big touchdown and have a big week. Tough matchup against Buffalo, and Tua has been, in the offense in general, has been struggling. They really can't get the run game going, and it's just hurting the entire offense. However, like I said, Jaylen Waddle does have that one play potential just to get a huge touchdown for you. So if you need a flex, I think you can line him up and he could get you a big week. If got to get a little lucky.
Yeah, next up is going to be Terry McLaurin. He's been pretty good ever since Heineke has taken over, coming off a bye week, so he should be well rested. And he's playing the same team he just played 2 weeks ago before their bye week, and he put up 20 points in that game. I don't see why this one couldn't be any different. So you're starting them as a flex with pretty high upside.
All right, next up, again in C tier, we've got Chris Olave. Really hasn't had any killer games for you. Hasn't had any huge weeks, hasn't had any weeks, dud weeks, but he's been pretty consistent. Although recently he's been a little bit disappointing. 3 of the last 4 weeks hasn't hit that 10 points in half PPR. He does have a much better matchup than he's had against the Atlanta Falcons. So I like lining him up this week, and he has been a little bit unlucky. Had a couple of plays that just he didn't get the calls that he wanted, that he could have had, a lot more. I guess there was a play against San Fran where he could have had a huge 40-yard bomb that may have been it almost was a touchdown. So he's definitely got that capability, and against the Falcons, I like starting Olave.
Next up is going to be Brandon Aiyuk. So Deebo Samuel is out this week, which means Brandon Aiyuk should be the main focal point of the passing offense. He should get the majority of the targets, and he is a very good receiver. He's excelled this year when he receives targets. So without Deebo and it going up against Seattle's defense, I think he's a good play this week.
All right, Christian Watson is a player that a lot of people are asking if they should start this week. I'm personally having to make a decision about Christian Watson in my lineup, and it's difficult for a number of reasons. So they're playing the Rams this week, which is a pretty good matchup. However, we don't know if Jalen Ramsey is going to be lined up on him. And if he is, that could cause a little bit of issues. He's had an amazing 4-game stretch. Everyone knows how good he's been, where he's had, 7 touchdowns in 4 weeks. He went 4 straight weeks with at least 1 touchdown. However, if you look, if he doesn't get that touchdown for you, he will probably disappoint. However, for me, I like that kind of player in my flex. I'm not willing to really bench that player for the most part unless I have amazing options because of the upside he provides. Just know that one of these playoff weeks, he probably will not get a touchdown. That could easily happen. Just very unlikely he keeps up this level of touchdown production, but he's still a player I want to line up this week because of the touchdown upside and just his upside in general.
Yep. And rounding out the C tier is going to be Devonta Smith. This is a very interesting play. So he's seen the bulk of his targets on games when Dallas Goedert has missed. I believe he's scored double-digit or higher half PPR points all 4 of the past weeks that Dallas Goedert has missed. Well, Dallas Goedert is back. So it's going to be interesting to see how his presence affects Devonta Smith, but they still do have a great matchup against Chicago. So he's a pretty solid flex option that has a decent floor and decent upside.
All right, moving now to D tier. We've got even more red flags with these players for one reason or another. And to start it off, we've got Christian Kirk. Now, Christian Kirk on a normal week, I would probably put in a higher spot, but against Dallas, that does put him a little bit down. He's been a little bit disappointing, and really his good games have come in really plus matchups, really good matchups, and I don't think the Dallas is his best matchup this week. I definitely think he's startable and a player who is on an offense who's ascending, and Trevor Lawrence looks pretty good and can definitely spread the ball around, and he's not killing you, so he's very, very startable. But again, with this matchup, I don't necessarily think he gets, the huge game that he's gotten in the past.
Next up is T. Higgins. If he was fully healthy, he would be higher on this list. I'm not completely afraid of the Tampa Bay matchup. However, after what happened last week where he only played one snap, goose egg for everybody, I can see why you'd be weary. It is a hamstring. Those are likely to re-injure and to linger. He did get in a limited practice as of we're recording today, so just monitor the reports. I still like him. If they say he's going to be a full go, I like him this week. However, with the injuries, that's why we have him as low as we do right now.
All right, we got Jerry Jeudy coming off a huge game. Definitely an interesting play here versus the Arizona Cardinals. So a really good matchup. And he's got Cortland Sutton dealing with a hamstring, Kendall Hinton dealing with a hamstring. They both didn't practice. Right now it's Wednesday. They haven't practiced as of now, but those players could go. Even if so, they could easily be limited, and Jerry Jeudy is my favorite receiver to start this week. But again, he's dealing with a backup quarterback probably, right? Dealing with the concussion. Russell Wilson probably won't play this week, so you're going to have to deal with that battle of the backup situation. Who knows how this game is going to go? It's really a wild card to me, but I think he's definitely a player you can roll out in your flex.
Next up is going to be Mike Evans. He's had a very frustrating and disappointing year. He has had some bad luck, a couple touchdowns overturned due to penalties, a couple of drops that are uncharacteristic that would have been touchdowns. Just all around Tampa Bay has just been a bad year, bad vibes all around. But I could see where it would be hard to get away from Mike Evans going up against Cincy, who is an offense that should be able to put up points against Tampa Bay. So you're likely going to be a high-scoring affair if you want a chance. So he's a decent upside flex for me, nothing more. I would actually like to get away from him if you have a better option, but I understand most of you out there will not. So I would still start him, just temper your expectations. He's not the Mike Evans of, the past few years that we've come to know.
All right. Again, in D tier, we've got Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, Juju has actually been pretty good pretty much all year as far as his involvement in the offense. He did deal with injury for a few weeks, but he's back now. And against Denver last week in a bad matchup, he had 11 targets. He had a good game. So I think he's definitely a startable player. The Houston matchup is interesting, like I stated earlier. They have actually been good against the pass. However, it doesn't seem like their defense is super elite. So I still think he's very startable. And the only thing is that it could easily be a blowout. And if he doesn't get his points in the first half, then that might be all you get.
Yep. Now to start off, our E tier is going to be Michael Pittman Jr. They play the Vikings this week, which is a good matchup. They're not very good at covering receivers, and they should be able to put up points, which should make this a pretty high-scoring game. Matt Ryan does like to throw the ball a pretty good bit. He's not a great start. He doesn't have super high upside, but he is the number one in an offense that should be chasing points. So he's nothing more than a flex to me, honestly, but you could do worse for a flex.
Yep. Gabe Davis is a player who's been struggling, and you definitely always can roll out because he can easily get a touchdown on any week, right? A matchup against the Miami Dolphins definitely could be a back and forth that could benefit the pass catchers for the Buffalo Bills, but you never know. I mean, the Dolphins have been struggling a little bit, and we'll see how well they're able to contain the Dolphins on defense. I do worry a little bit about the Bills getting ahead in this one and not really relying on the pass. However, it is a divisional matchup and a very important game for both teams, so it could be very competitive in this one.
Yep. Next up is going to be Zay Jones. He would be higher if the matchup was better. He's been getting targeted pretty heavily over the past month or so, but he does play Dallas, which is a tough defense. Again, he's their outside receiver, so I'm not sure how Trevon Diggs is going to guard it. I don't know if he will shadow Zay Jones or if he'll just stay on one side of the field. Whoever's on that, he'll guard. I don't know. But he's great. Zay Jones has been pretty much a top 12 receiver over the past 4 weeks, which is crazy to say, but in PPR he has been. So I'm rolling him out as a flex this week. He should have a decent floor due to the targets he gets, but I think his upside might be capped just due to the matchup.
All right, next up, Donovan Peoples-Jones in the E tier. Matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Not the best matchup. However, that passing offense did look better last week, and we hope to see that improvement, or at least consistency in the passing game continue. And in that last week, he did get 12 targets. So hopefully if that kind of target volume continues, then he can be at least consistent, which is what he's been all year for you. Hasn't been an explosive player, but a consistent one. If all you need is 10 points in that flex, I think he can get you that. So very startable, Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah. That brings us to start off our F tier, which is going to be Marquise Brown. Unfortunately, since he's come back from injury, he really hasn't gotten a chance to prove how good he is. And I don't think he's going to in this matchup. Denver is a very great defense. And now we're stuck with Colt McCoy as our starter again. So we really didn't even get to see the Kyler, D-Hop, Marquise Brown experience to the full that we were hoping. So, I mean, he's nothing more than a pretty low upside flex to me at this point, just due to the matchup, due to the offensive line being horrendous, and now Colt McCoy is our starter. I just don't think he has the upside that he once did with Kyler.
All right, next up in the F tier, DJ Chark. 2 good weeks in a row now, 90-plus yards in those 2 weeks against Jacksonville and Minnesota. This week going up against the New York Jets. So a little bit of a tougher matchup for sure, and that's the only reason he's this low. I do think he's a player that you can definitely roll out, and he has a decent amount of upside. Definitely can get you a touchdown. And Jared Goff has actually looked pretty good. That team in general, I think, will be competitive in this game. So I think there's going to be points to go around, and DJ Chark is a very flexible player. The only concern is the matchup.
Next up is going to be Alan Lazard. This goes back to basically the same thing we said about Christian Watson. The matchup looks good on paper. We just don't know how they're going to play it. Who Jalen Ramsey is going to shadow. If he does shadow, maybe he just guards one portion of the field. We don't know. But Alan Lazard has been pretty consistent all year. I believe he only has 2 games under double-digit half PPR points, which is about as good as you can ask for someone that you drafted as late as you did Alan Lazard. Probably picked him up off the waiver. So I think he's a pretty good flex this week with a solid floor and upside if he's able to get you that touchdown.
All right, Diontae Johnson coming in. A player who has a decent matchup at the Carolina Panthers this week. And really, I mean, again, not an explosive player at all. Hasn't got a touchdown all year. I'm pretty sure he's the player with the most targets without a touchdown. But he does give you that target volume. Again, 3 straight weeks of 8+ targets. That's really what he's done all year. Another player who in a PPR format can get you a decent amount of points. Outside of PPR, I'm looking for other options.
And then just to wrap us up, we got George Pickens, which is going to be basically the same case we just made for Diontae Johnson. He does have more upside, but he also has a lower floor. He does not get as many targets and catches. However, he is more likely to score touchdowns. So if you have George Pickens and you don't really have anybody that you like, he's worth just tossing out there. He has voiced some frustrations over the past couple of weeks with his role in wanting to get more targets. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, but I think he has a decent upside. So if you want to flex him, I wouldn't blame you.
All right. That does it for our top 36 wide receivers for Week 15. Hope you guys can win your playoff matches. If you did enjoy the video, leave a like and subscribe. Subscribing is the easiest way to help us out, and it helps us out a ton, so we really appreciate it. Thank you guys for getting us this far, and let's keep it going. If you liked the video, again, write a comment. You can ask us any questions. We answer any questions in the comment section, so just leave them below. We have been the Fantasy Bros. We are out.